So the way people think in general in the West is largely coming from religious philosophy and ideas, right? It's the same in the East. Our worldview is formed. I'm not saying that the East and the West have the same worldview. Obviously, they're different, but our worldviews come from these mystic religious traditions, right? Because of course, religion is for a very long time it was the epicenter of education, right? And this is how people learned the basic moral code, right? These ideas that were imported from Persia were then flipped to serve the desires of conquest for the burgeoning Christian religion. What is different here, though, is that in the old ancient Persian religion, in Zoroastrianism, for example, you have ready-made opposites. You have this idea of you have Ahura Mazda and his brother Ahriman, and they are both born from the same father. Ahriman is evil, and Ahura Mazda is good, and you have this battle between good and evil, right? In the Judeo-Christian tradition, however, something a little different happens, and that in Judaism, there's only one God. There's no ready-made opposite. There's one God, and if you choose to follow God's law, then He will look after you, and everything's good. If you stray away from that, if you stray away from God, you become evil, right? But there's no like ready-made evil like there would be in the Zoroastrian religion. So that is that's more of a closer relation to Judaism, right? So in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, but keep this in mind, there's still a flip that occurs in Christianity, right? Because the flip being that God wants to, in the old Persian sense, in the Zoroastrian sense, God wants you to be godlike, to follow God's laws, and reach your own divinity. Realize that you are God, right? Whereas in Judaism, God is separate from you, right? So that's an important distinction to make. So in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, Saruman the White begins as the most powerful magician and guardian of the realm, right? Only later, desiring power for himself, does he become a sorcerer, right? So in this case, in Lord of the Rings, there's no ready-made opposites. This is classic Judeo-Christian thinking, right? As it comes through the Judeo-Christian tradition. This plot line so clearly demonstrates the origins of Western religion, right? Was this intentional by Tolkien? Probably not, but rather it is an echo of Tolkien's worldview as a devout Roman Catholic. Okay? Look deep enough at just about any of these great stories of the West and you will find these examples. Very deeply, the story of the Lord of the Rings, the archetypal themes, if you trace them back to their source, they're essentially religious ideas. And this is how most people think that are brought up in this tradition, right? In this civilization, in the Western civilization. And I want to apologize to atheists because chances are you're also caught in the matrix of religious thought without even knowing it. And it's all over the place. So this is just one small example of how our thinking is influenced. Yeah, another one, of course, would be the idea of nudity, right? That's very taboo um, in Western society. Less so taboo on the French Riviera, thankfully, but still very taboo. And that's these echoes of these religious ideas are so instilled in us over thousands of years, and they're almost like it's like they're baked into our DNA, and it takes a lot of work to unlearn a lot of that conditioning because it's everywhere, right? Even if you don't go to church a day in your life, that conditioning is everywhere. So it's hard to escape. So many seemingly ordinary words we use today have religious origins, right? Some of these words convey the ancient power, feeling, and meaning coming from our Indo-European roots. Here's a few examples of words with God just kind of hiding inside. Enthusiasm. And this comes from the Greek entheos, meaning in God. I should also mention the word entheogen, meaning God within. Entheogen is used to describe psychedelic substances when you have like a spiritual or religious ceremony, like with peyote, ayahuasca, etc. Those are called entheogens. Goodbye. That's the English language contraction of God be with ye, right? That's pretty commonly known, I think. Holiday. That's the English language contraction of holy day. In the United Kingdom, for example, they don't say they're going on vacation, they're going on holiday. Diva, which is the Sanskrit, our word diva, right, comes from the Sanskrit deva, which means God. Juggernaut. This is from the Sanskrit word Jagannatha, meaning Lord of the world. And of all things, the word swastika from the Sanskrit svastika, meaning God-fearing being in the form of the sun, right? So these influences, the way we think, these words are everywhere. And if you start looking for these yourself, you're going to find a bunch more. And having that awareness is going to help you begin to unwind some of that stuff, to unlearn some of those things. And then, and only then, when you don't have someone else's ideas running through your head all the time and all of this conditioning, then you can start to come into your own, truly your own divinity, and reach a higher level in your own life, in your own existence, right? Because you gotta think there's a lot of traps hidden everywhere, a lot of traps of thinking that we kind of automatically go to. And religion, of all of them, of all of the external influences, religion is by far the biggest, because it's been with us for the longest time. And, of course, it had a monopoly on education and law for a very long time, right? So we're just starting to unwind that in the past 3 centuries, right? Somewhere around there. We're just starting to unwind the past 2000 plus, right? So let's go a little deeper on a few more words so we can demonstrate what really is lying under the surface of some of these. And I hope this gets you started in thinking and inspecting things critically and really thinking about things in this way, right? So then you can start to see things as they really are instead of how you might have been programmed, right? Because what I'm doing really is completely worthless if you're just going to sit there and watch and go, oh, this is interesting, and maybe comment and, hey, this is really cool, neat, and then you go about your day. If you don't put this into practice, really you're wasting your time watching this, right? At least that's how I feel about it. And by the way, this isn't like a homework assignment. Yeah, I'm not going to give you any homework, so nor should I, or nor should you accept it. So the word scribe, in English, we derive the meaning from scribe, to write. This is what scribe means, of course, right? We know this. This actually comes from the Hebrew word scriba, which is a teacher or interpreter of Jewish law. This term scriba comes from the Hebrew religious usage and, of course, was later used in Latin because, right, what comes before, we don't reinvent the wheel with these things. We learn from the older, more established foundations, and then we build upon that, right? So in the modern sense, scribe is a keeper of accounts, a writer, a secretary of some sort, right? Court reporter, for example, some sort of, to scribe is to keep a record or write. So remember, while Latin transcended this old term scriba, or the original term scriba that we get from Hebrew, and changed the meaning somewhat of scriba, it also included the original meaning of the word, and it includes the original essence of the original power of this word, right? That doesn't go away. We just add another sedimentary layer on top, right? Like if you're looking at a gorge or the Grand Canyon or something like that, you see all those layers of rock and dirt and all sediment and all these different things, right? That's basically what our language and what our thinking consists of. So peeling back those layers and unwinding that, or maybe sandblasting it away if you can, that really reveals quite a lot, right? And it frees you up to start to see the world as it really is. Because word magic really isn't about words at all. It's not about words at all. It's about seeing what's happening beneath the surface, right? So in Latin, so let's go deeper with what describe means. In Latin, describe is something, it means to interpret writing, to describe, right? I'm going to describe something is to interpret writing, or is to have your own interpretation of something and then relay that to someone else, right? The root word, and remember with syllables, the word describe is 2 syllables, so 2 syllables gives you a clue that there's 2 root words connected together, right? So let's look at the first root. The root word de can mean either from or undo, right? And scribe, of course, is to write. So describe could then be interpreted either as the act of unwriting or to take from writing. Right, you're taking something from writing. That is to say, describe is to take words read from a page and transform the markings into ideas or concepts which the mind can then grasp, right? Because remember, describe is, you could think of it as writing in reverse, right? So you're not writing, you're transcribing into your mind, for example, right? Transcribe, trans to move, right? So you're kind of transcribing this in a way, this description or describing. And once the mind has grasped it, once the mind has a hold of this and knows what these words mean, you've described it. Only after this description process is accomplished can the ideas or concepts be explained or discussed in a conversation. This word explained is very interesting. Again, 2 syllables, ex meaning out of nothing, right? Out of nothing. And plain means to make level or to make sense out of. So you could say explain literally means to make sense out of nothing, right? Because objectively, what you're describing, what you describe, right? In the metaphysical sense, in your thoughts, it's nothing, right? There's nothing tangible or physical happening, right? So you're explaining it. Does that make sense? So to make sense in this case is to make a sound verbally in order to explain using speech. That's what explain essentially is. The reverse of this process, which is to transform your inner dialogue. So say you want to put this on a page. You want to take your thoughts, and instead of explaining it out into the world, right, you're taking your thoughts and putting it into symbols, right? This is to transform your inner dialogue or thoughts into writing, is commonly known as prescription, right? This word is defined as determined in advance. So you're before, and pre is before and scribe is write, right? So before writing, you have to think about what you're going to write. That's prescription. So before writing, one must prescribe or think about how and what they are preparing to write. So you have a description and a prescription, right? Is that confusing enough yet? Are you beginning to see, even if this isn't making a whole lot of sense, are you beginning to see some of these magical operations happening? Or do you sense like, wow, there's more to this, right? There's more going on here, right? It goes a lot further than this. It goes way deeper than this. This is just an introductory series. We're just scratching the surface here. But when you think about words in that certain way, there's a lot of power in there, right? There's a lot going on. Whew. That was that last slide was very complicated. So, and I'm still thinking about that last slide because wow, there's a lot going on. This is the end of part 4. This is St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican, of course. And I was always endlessly fascinated with this obelisk. This obelisk was brought from Egypt around 37 AD. This is called Caligula's obelisk. And there are just over, I think, a dozen obelisks in total in Rome alone. There's more obelisks in Europe than there are in Egypt for sure, right? There's one in Place de la Concorde in Paris. They're all over the place. I think there's one, obviously the Washington Monument is kind of a modern one. But this obelisk is interesting because it is a pagan symbol. It's a symbol of a pagan religion plunked right down at the doorstep of the Vatican, right in the heart of the Vatican. It's used as a sundial now, but it's very curious that they would take a pagan symbol and drag it all the way from Egypt and set it up, right? You can see the cross at the top. There's really the Globus Cruciger is at the top of the obelisk. It's also at the top, of course, of the dome of the basilica. It was said that the ashes of Julius Caesar were inside that Globus Cruciger. That's been debunked, though. I don't think that that's not true. Makes a good story. But the interesting thing, here's the most interesting thing about this obelisk, and all obelisks, that's hard to say, by the way, obelisks. The original obelisks were, and this one, I don't know if this one ever broke in pieces. It looks like it might, right? It might have broken at some point towards the upper third. But these obelisks were covered with a metal alloy called electrum. And electrum is roughly 3 or 4 parts, maybe 3 parts gold, 1 part silver with some copper mixed in. It's a naturally occurring alloy, and it would have covered the entire obelisk. The obelisks were meant to symbolize the sun, right? In many different ways. There's this sense of ascendancy of the light to the heavens, right? It appears as a sun ray, but it was covered in gold. So these would have been like almost like a bright yellow when you would have seen these obelisks at the time they were initially constructed and finished. And this sun symbolism is very much, you can find it all through the symbolism, the architecture, the art of the Roman Catholic Empire, all through the Vatican and that kind of thing. So it's almost like a Catholic nod, or it's an homage to the older traditions that are venerating essentially more or less the same things in a sense, right? The Son of God, Christ is the Son of God. The word Son, S-U-N, the word that we use, and the word sun as in the sun in the sky, S-O-N, they have the same origins, right? There's a reason why these words are so close. And so this idea of veneration of the sun, Sunday, right? Sunday being the holy day for the Christians, has some real roots in ancient traditions, right? And the scholars and the ones in the know in the Catholic Church realize this, and I think in a way they're honoring this, because why else would they bring a symbol of a pagan religion over to their front doorstep? It's because they're kind of venerating it in a way, right? So there is some deep wisdom in this veneration. So this is so I'm going to end on that note. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy what I'm doing, please subscribe, like the video, and feel free to comment. I always like to see your comments and questions and things that I miss, because I know I miss a lot of things. I'm not an expert in any of this. This is, if anything, I just like to look at how all of these things are related and look at our ancient origins and pull the nuggets out and pull the good stuff out and then throw the rest away, right? Because there are some important things, some lessons through the ages that many of us need to pay attention to, I think. And there's also some stuff that we can just toss in the bin, right? Knowing the difference is something that we discuss. I'm going to discuss a lot in this series. So this is the end of part 4. Stay tuned. Join me, I should say, next week for part 5. And we're going to get into a little more of symbolism, but it's going to be with sound. So part 5 is about sound symbolism. And if you don't know what sound symbolism is, this is going to be quite a video, I think. I think you'll be quite interested. So I'll see you next week. Thank you.